Good morning, and thank you for coming. This is my first SaaStr, and I have to say, I absolutely love the energy. So it's great to be here. Don't forget to see my colleagues right over to stage left if you want a selfie cookie, and it's pretty damn cool, right over there. Anyway, my name is Mary. I'm Outreach's Global Innovation Evangelist. And just to give you a couple of ideas of how I spend my time, I basically keep my ears to the ground. I talk to business leaders across B2B sales all the time. I conduct primary research, quantitative and qualitative, to help the market and our clients understand trends that are coming down the path so that you and your organizations can prepare for those today and set yourselves up to thrive in the future. So today, what I'm going to talk about is a quick lens into the future of how I see B2B sales. So we'll start by talking about what's happening between buyers and sellers. And I'm able to share with you some great research that I conducted with Forrester and Dynata in April and June of this year to really look at how buyers wanted to approach the buying process. And you're going to find it really, really interesting. The next thing I want to talk about is how the sales organization is changing. It's becoming more agile and adept and technology enabled. And particularly as we go into a time of global economic headwinds, you're going to find yourselves having to do more with less. And I'm going to talk with you about how you can do that through technology. And then we'll finish the conversation today with some strategies that you can implement right away as you go home. So there's a couple of things that are happening in the world, and I just wanted to share those macro trends with you here. We've got generational shifts. For any of you who have followed my research over the years at Forrester, you know I've been following millennials for some time now. What's happening now is that we have a tectonic shift in terms of who is influencing buying decisions. 93% of millennials are involved in purchase decisions in B2B situations with their own or shared budgets. We still have Xers that have higher budgets up in the $1 million range, but overall, millennials are dramatically influencing buying decisions. The other thing that we've been talking about for some time is the digitization of the buying and selling process. COVID accelerated that trend that had been in place probably since about 2015. Back in 2015, when I was at Forrester, 1 in 5 buyers said they would prefer to meet in a remote or digital setting than in person. And you can see, as COVID hit, that accelerated things dramatically. Many of us are working in remote and digital settings as we sell. And then finally, the technological advances, namely with AI and automation, are pretty profound at this point and are embedded into our solution as well as many other top-tier tech solutions. And why is that important? The automation can save massive amounts of inefficiency that happens on your selling side, from your chief revenue officer's activities all the way down to your post-sale personnel activities. And certainly the AI, based on all of the data that can be captured across that revenue process, will allow everyone to interact with more insights and personalization. So these are the 3 things at a macro level that I think are setting the stage for a dramatically different buying and selling world. One of the things that I've been following, and Forrester and Gartner have been as well, is that the sales cycle is becoming more complex. And with this complexity, it really indicates to me that a status quo approach to going to market, an old school way of selling, isn't going to cut it in this environment. You can see here that the number of interactions that it takes to close the deal has increased dramatically over a year's time, about 70%. Now, this is actually post-MQL. This is once sales has validated the lead. So your buyers are looking for more omni-channel interactions across what is increasingly a non-linear cycle. The next thing that the data shows is that stakeholders are increasing in size and complexity. Gartner and Forrester now no longer call buyers buyers. They call them buying groups. So you're seeing a larger amount of folks involved in the buying decision, often with different and competing agendas. And now that folks are moving away from the cities, you're seeing distributed buying committees. And so that's adding time to the cycle. And you can see here this last data point on the right, and this was data that was conducted in April of this year, 75% of buyers say their buying cycle has increased in time, in duration, over the last 24 months. The other thing that my research shows is that channel preferences have changed. Not terribly surprising, but number one, the number one preferred channel for a sales meeting is virtual right now. Number two is the phone, and three is in person. You can see email continues to be a channel that is oversaturated, and I think coming up strong will be direct messaging and personal messaging off some of those apps and social platforms that you all use, whether it's WhatsApp, LinkedIn, and others. The other thing that we've seen is that consumer-based marketplaces have really trained business buyers on what to expect in the business environment. And this data really surprised me because I've been selling for a long time, over a course of many decades in different organizations. And I always thought that buyers would prefer sellers to bring in an expert practitioner after the fact. What this research shows is that buyers actually expect an instantaneous answer in the moment, almost in your first call. And what Seth Mars of Forrester says, he says that buyers actually prefer a good answer in the moment rather than a perfect answer 2 weeks later. Buyers want efficiencies and value efficiencies in the process. And they also value a seller who can quickly and easily access information in the moment. That gives them more confidence in the seller as well as the supplier organization that they're working with. Now we come to this concept of we're all going to have to do more with less. And there isn't a selling organization in the world that doesn't have something that we call a sales execution gap. What a sales execution gap is the amount of revenue seen here in the gray line that an organization delivers versus the amount of revenue it could deliver in this purple line if it was highly optimized from a talent, process, and technology standpoint. So most organizations are wrought with inefficiencies. And if you can route out those inefficiencies, you can close that gap and get yourselves to a place where you can drive massive amounts of revenue, whether you have a sales organization of 10, 100, or 1,000 people. The other thing my research showed is that sellers are now becoming pretty smart, and they are demanding and asking for a top-tier sales technology stack. And oh, by the way, that doesn't mean just CRM. So this data here shows that sellers find a top-tier tech stack very, very valuable, or extremely valuable, or valuable when considering an organization to apply to. So as you start to think about talent and acquiring talent, particularly in a down market, top-tier sales talent is going to be incredibly invaluable. And those folks are going to dig under the covers to understand what your sales tech stack looks like, because they know that's going to drive efficiencies and effectiveness for them and make them more successful. And then to peel back the layers just a bit more, I wanted to understand what the functionalities were that today's sellers really, really valuable. And you can see here, automation comes in number one. Number two, the ability to surface up insights and recommendations in the spot. And the ability to understand in-market buyer behavior. So again, sellers are becoming pretty sophisticated, and they want to have help so that they can spend their time on high-value activities versus the 60% of the time they typically spend on minutia. As you also think about sales talent, what my research shows is that sellers really value and appreciate transparency, flexibility, whether that has to do with communication on the transparency side, flexibility on the work-life balance side, and obviously they want significant rewards on the economic side. The other thing that we're seeing is that sellers and corporate employees writ large want to work at companies that are socially responsible, that value diversity, equity, inclusion, that think about environmental issues and others. And many of them actually want their companies to take an active stand and position on some of these issues. So you're starting to see more of a blending between work and personal life and values playing a role in business decisions. So now I want to start to use that as a backdrop to take you to what I think the selling organization of the future is going to look like. And let's start with attributes and activities. This is very different from the types of sellers that I would have hired when I was a CRO, but we need sellers who are going to be predictable producers. How many of you have thought of the 80-20 rule for much of your careers as sellers or leaders? Familiar with that, right? Well, we're moving away from that to a rule where you're going to see 60–70% of your sellers meeting or exceeding quota, but you're going to be doing it with a smaller organization. These sellers need to be digitally first in terms of their approach. Now, this isn't to say that in-person sales meetings on-site don't happen, but they need to be very digitally savvy. They also have to have a data mindset. They don't need to be data scientists, but they need to be able to work with their marketing team and their data analytics team to gain significant insights that they can apply back to their customers. Who knows? Sellers of the future may even negotiate data deals between partners of their customer organization. I'm happy to say that long-term relationship building never goes away. I fully believe that people buy from sellers they know, like, and trust, and I don't think that's going to change. So the relationship building skills are important. Adopting and being comfortable in hybrid methods, delivering an effective meeting over Zoom versus in person requires different skill sets. So sellers need to be trained and upskilled on how to do that. And they're going to lean into collaboration. I think you will see, if you're not seeing it already, your organization starting to lead to larger selling groups. As a way to match the larger groups on the buy side, you're seeing larger groups on the sell side. My research shows that buyers want to interact with senior executives, customers, referrals, practitioners across the sell cycle. So your seller is not going to be that lone wolf that's going to drag the deal across the finish line, but someone who is highly collaborative and can bring together the pieces the same way a symphony conductor would bring together different aspects of the orchestra. So let's talk about managers. They're going to get predictable cross-team production. You're seeing that predictable, efficient growth is the way of the future. Growth at all cost is now fully behind us. This manager needs to be able to comfortably coach in a hybrid setting, be able to ingest data quickly, and make quick decisions on coaching. Do you know how much time managers spend coaching today? About 14% of their time. Imagine if you as leaders can move that up to 20%, 25%, 30%. That's how you begin to close the sales execution gap. These managers need to gain leverage through technology, whether it's a range of different solutions that provide tech coaching and other types of means. They're going to be a champion for not only personal and professional development, but mental health. This is increasingly important to the set of employees we have today. They're going to effectuate positive change. I think that's something very, very typical. And they need to be data savvy. When I interviewed CROs several months ago, they rated data savviness as one of the highest attributes of a sales manager. Very different from sales managers of the past. And now let's talk about sales leaders. This role is changing dramatically. And one of my sales leaders that I admire very much, Anna Baird, used to say, the CRO's role now is a combination of CRO, CPO, Chief People Officer, and CIO, Chief Information Officer. The role is becoming much more operationally oriented than focused exclusively on relationship building and communication and motivation. Of course, some of those things don't go away. So again, this individual is going to be responsible for delivering predictable, efficient growth. They need to hire a diverse sales team. This is an issue that even in a post-COVID world is becoming even more and more difficult. Right now, we have 25% of B2B sellers are identify as women. Prior to COVID, that number was 33%. So we've seen a 10% drop in 24 plus months. So this issue is going to continue to bubble up on every sales leader's plate, particularly as you see folks who identify as women leading the buying process as we move forward. I kind of like to say that empathy is the new accountability. For a sales leader, accountability is never going to go away, but it's much more nuanced than leveraging the stick and the carrot right now. Empathetic interactions are essential. A couple other things. Buyer-centric approaches to going to market will be critical. And then this leader needs to have pretty significant financial acumen. So again, finance, data, tech, and empathy will be an important part going forward. Don't read too much into this org chart of the future. I still need to develop it out. And if you have any ideas what it's going to look like, please DM me. I would love to crowdsource what you think this org of the future looks like. But I've been talking, as have the analysts at Forrester, for many years. Who's going to run go-to-market? Is it your CRO, CMO? Is it some sort of combination of both? Here's something you need to think about. The time that sellers have to influence the buying decision is getting smaller and smaller, which means that marketing is playing a bigger and bigger role in acquiring and evolving and growing customers. Marketing and sales will absolutely have to come together at one point and are heading more aggressively there now. So I do view a single leader, a growth leader, and maybe they come from the sales side or the marketing side, who will run go-to-market. And you can see some of the other roles that I see there as well. The big thing I want to emphasize is that it's going to be, your direct selling organization is going to be smaller, more agile, and deliver more consistent revenue. And this organization is going to be heavily enabled with technology. So to give you my vision of what the sales tech stack of the future looks like, I first want to kind of take you through the journey. When you think about sales tech prior to 2015, of course, there's some exceptions, but really CRM was and is the only show in town. What happened in 2015, and this was about 9 to 10 years later, after we saw this amazing consolidation around marketing automation, is that sales tech began to get the limelight. And as an analyst, what I do is follow the money. And you saw at 2015 that companies like companies in the enablement category, the engagement category, the readiness category, started to get VC investment. These were point solution tools that took the principles of marketing automation, using automation and insights, but instead of using a one-to-many, it used a one-to-one approach. And many organizations experimented with a range of these tools. And it made sense at the time. But as we edged up to 2020, I made a big prediction in the fall of that year that we would start to see massive consolidation away from these single point solution providers to platforms. And that consolidation really accelerated in the summer of 2021 when you saw lots and lots of different acquisitions and the results of organic product development come into play. And why did this happen? Well, the natural evolution for companies like Outreach and others is to move from a single product to become a multi-product platform. So that was what was happening on the vendor or the provider side, as we call it. But on the buyer side, buyers began to tire of having to manage multiple separate relationships. They didn't like having disparate sets of data, and they didn't want to be the systems integrator of their own sales tech stack. So they started to push the vendors as well, and we did see that consolidation. Today, where we are is right at the tip of an area that I call platformization. And this is where you have sales execution platforms like Outreach, which sits on top of a CRM system and supports everyone in the revenue organization, from your CRO to your post-sale personnel and everyone in between, with functionality and tools that are designed to support their workflows and activities across the entire revenue cycle. So you're driving massive efficiencies which allow you to close that sales execution gap. You're getting massive insights from the data capture. And what's really unique about these execution platforms is that you have a single source of data that can be kept in the platform itself or synced with your CRM. And now the data is accurate because you're using automation, not salespeople as data entry folks. So you're saving time on the sell side, and you're getting massive amounts of buyer and seller data that can then inform your deals, your pipelines, and your forecast based on buyer activities versus triangulation of that forecast across the entire organization. So a couple of things you can think about as you leave this session today, and like I said, I'm happy to continue the dialogue. These are some of my favorite topics, is think about tuning your go-to-market strategies to relate to how modern buyers want to buy. If you don't do that, you will be displaced by a competitor who does. The first thing you need to do is get a hold of or a handle of what does the sales execution gap look like at your company? How big is it? And where are the areas that you can actually start to close it? Third, think about redeploying some of your headcount to technology, and not individual solutions, but rather a large platform that can work in concert with your CRM, deliver more value to that investment, and capture buyer behavioral data and sentiment data across the entire cycle to use for insights both externally and internally as you make business decisions. And then take the time, especially as we go into this global economic downturn, to go out and acquire the top sales talent you can. This is a good time to do so. Many sellers are out there and available, and it's also a good time to retrench, retrain, and upskill your sellers to succeed in this environment. And finally, Gartner says that 70% of CROs are seeing their tech budget increase. Why is this? The reason is because now sales tech is viewed as a strategic lever for the CRO to help that person operationalize their go-to-market strategy. So embrace technology and your technology partners as competitive differentiators. So thank you so much for listening to me today. Again, I'm happy to continue the dialogue.